They are so rich in their commitment to the Detroit community. They are so dedicated to Cum Alum. And that lies within their neshama. That's who they are. That's what they know. And they're over 80, and we like to honor those people. That is very cool to us.
Hi, everybody. Today is one of the most important days of my life because I'm being honored by a special group. I would like to share with everyone today of what I learned in life. I think we need to be self-sufficient so we don't depend on other people for our successes, our happiness, and our failures. I grew up in Detroit on the west side, and unfortunately, my mother and father were no Ozzie and Harriet. I went to Central High School, but was often kept home to take care of my handicapped brother and to do household chores. And then I spent 30 wonderful years at Camp Tamaqua, which changed my life because that's when I met Cal. The buildup of my life has given me a sense of contentment. And when I think of that, I think of the quote from Eleanor Roosevelt that fits me so beautifully. What did she say? She said, "A woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong she is until she gets into hot water." In closing, I would like to thank the Jewish Senior Life and the Committee of 8 over 80 for giving me this lovely honor.
I'm Bill Farber. I went to Central High School. I didn't finish Central High School. Got tired of going to school. I went in the Army for 3 years. And when I came back, I met my wife. She wasn't my wife then, but it's been 60 years already, so we're still going. My grandmother was the greatest influence on me. She was very good. She was very modern for a woman her age. Never went to school a day in her life. Very intelligent woman. She died when I was 16. That's when I went in the Army. I left home. I turned 17. The next day I was in the Army. When I got out of the Army, I went to pharmacy school. Wasn't a very good student, but I did get through. Had a drugstore for 5 years on Linwood and Glendale. It wasn't for me. It should have been. My father's a pharmacist, my cousin's a pharmacist, but it wasn't. Then I went in the wholesale business. Went in 64, sold out in 88. Financially well set for the rest of my life. The question is, why do I do things like this? Not many people just give away money. Well, there's two main reasons. Number one, if I don't give it away, my wife will spend it. That's number one. Number two, being Jewish, it seems you have an obligation. If you have money, big money, then you give it away because you can't spend it. It's impossible to spend. You really never feel good till you do something good. Otherwise, how can you feel good? It's a good feeling. People need it. I was very fortunate. I made much more money than I could ever spend. Kids are taken care of, grandkids are taken care of, relatives are taken care of. I've got cousins by the dozens, really. When I was chosen for the 8 over 80 award, I assume my kids put me into it because I didn't put me into it, I think it's very, very honoring. I really do.
I'd like to be remembered as my name is Roland, like Holland, not Roland, like Poland. I was born in Virginia, Minnesota. It was the Queen City of the Iron Range, and it was in 3 blocks from where I grew up was the largest producing iron ore mine in the world. And I was born above my father's store. My father had a men's clothing store, and I was born above that store. I attended college in Virginia, Minnesota, which was which was affiliated with the University of Minnesota, until I was drafted to the U.S. Combat Engineers, drafted during World War II. And then I came back to Virginia, and I was looking for a nice Jewish girl. There were no Jewish girls in Virginia, Minnesota. And I had 2 sisters in Detroit and some other family. And so I moved to the Detroit area, where I met a beautiful Jewish girl, and we were married for 62 years. I was one of the first people in the United States to get a government loan to help start a business, and I opened my own store in Detroit on West Verner Highway. And I became the president of the West Verner Businessmen Association. I also was a volunteer for SCORE, Service Corps of Retired Executives, which is a division of the U.S. Small Business Administration in Washington. My father used to have a bank in his store on a showcase. It started the March of Dimes, and people used to put dimes in to help fight polio. For every mile that we walked, we could donate 1 dime from, and I started that, and the walk was 25 miles at first around Belle Isle and back to downtown Detroit to the Detroit ballpark, and then back again. And that was my first year, and I have walked for the March of Dimes and raised thousands of dollars for 40 years. And maybe that's why I was chosen as one of the 8 over 80s. And one of my most accomplishments is that I have 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, who are very accomplished in their life.
My name is Sid Stone, and I am an ophthalmologist, and I know how to spell it, and the eyes have it. My saga started 13 years before I was born. My uncle came to the United States and landed at Ellis Island. The immigration officer asked him what his name was, and he said, Moshe Chechstein. And he was told, it's Morris Stone now. And that's how we got our family name. I was born on April 20th, 1925. I was enrolled in the United Hebrew School and then into Detroit Public Schools. I graduated from Cass Technical High School in 1943, enrolled in the College of Engineering at Wayne University. I completed 1 semester, and during that time I registered for the draft, and I was inducted into the Army in July, and then was sent down to Fort Benning, Georgia for infantry basic training for 13 weeks, and then sent up to Brooklyn, New York, where I was in the Army Specialized Training Program for 1 semester. And after that, I joined the 75th Infantry Division on maneuvers, and then was sent overseas in the fall of 1944 and joined the 28th Infantry Division in the Hürtgen Forest in Germany. I froze my feet in the foxhole, and I was evacuated and eventually returned to the United States and discharged. I then went into pre-med at Wayne University, followed by medical school, graduating in 1951, internship at Detroit Receiving Hospital, residency in ophthalmology, and I entered private practice in 1955. I was in solo private practice for 46 years, and I met my wife, Betty, at a New Year's Eve party on January 1 of 1959, and we were married by Rabbi Boris Adler at Sharet Zedek on Chicago Boulevard on June 7th of 1959. I feel privileged that I have been part of a prestigious organization, the Practice of Medicine, and that I have been able to help my fellow man and in that way help to repair the world.
I was born and raised in Duluth, Minnesota, in a modern Orthodox family. My father was the Gutzkeit of the city. He was president of everything, and that's where I learned my lessons. I was fortunate to go to the University of Michigan to get my undergraduate degree. I came to Detroit to go to work and got a graduate degree. And on my way to Chicago, I met my husband here and stayed here until he moved me to Chicago for 23 years. We came back to Detroit because this is the most wonderful Jewish community in the country. I am the youngest of 4 children. I had 3 older brothers. That's why my name is Sissy. It's a legal name. After we started our family of my 2 girls, Leah and Laura, I started tutoring kids in Hebrew school so that they could successfully have bar and bat mitzvahs even though they were learning disabled. And then I was tutoring. I started my volunteer life when I was teaching. I started out as with the Young Leadership Department of Federation, and I just loved the volunteer work I did, along with being, along with working and having my family. Tikkun Olam doesn't mean just repairing the world. It means doing something for somebody else that they can't do for themselves. I can think of many, many things in the world that I've done, but one thing is not enough for me. How could I ignore working at the court and helping women save their lives by filling out personal protection orders? How could I not think about the faces of the Kadima clients at the Sunday program that National Council of Jewish Women sponsors? When I was informed that I would be one of the 8 over 80s, I told my husband he couldn't tell anybody until it became public. Great punishment for him. His buttons were bursting. I could not have done any of the things I did without him fully supporting my other life, which was my volunteer life. I think that this 8 over 80 award is probably the best that is given in the community with all the awards we offer. I have friends who live at Mir. I have friends who live in other of our agencies, and the services are irreplaceable. What we do for our aging population through Jewish Senior Life is irreplaceable.
My name is Earl Reamer. I was born in Detroit on June 21, 1933. At an early age, I began attending Thurkel Elementary, often mispronounced, often questioned about, was the school really Circle and not Thurkel? And no, the answer still remains Thurkel. Every Sunday morning at about 6:30 in the morning, my dad would knock on my bedroom door, and I always say that he had no rachmanis for me, regardless of what time I came in early that evening, in terms of coming in at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I always knew that we were going to drive to the store early on Sunday morning, have breakfast together at Greenfield's restaurant on Woodward, and then open up the doors of the store at 8:30 in the morning. I have 2 brothers. My older brother, Harvey, unfortunately, on May 23 of 1983, was killed at his place of business in Detroit. As a tribute to his memory, I began doing Shiva services for members of Temple Bethel. For 30 years, in visits to over 1,000 homes, I have continued to do Shiva services as a tribute to my brother's memory. And I hope in some small way I'm able to help those who mourn and give them moments of comfort in terms of doing the Shiva service at the various homes. I graduated from Waynes Law School, and it was at that time that I met my wife. Jackie's best girlfriend and my best boyfriend got married shortly after both Richard and I graduated from Waynes Law School. And so these friends of Jackie and mine conspired to arrange for not only our meeting, but our being part of the bridal ceremony at their wedding. So that was the first time that we walked down the aisle together. And of course, we walked down the aisle the second time in 1961. And out of our wonderful marriage of 53 years, we have 3 wonderful children, Eric, Stephen, and Michelle, who all married within a 4-year period of time. Life has been a great experience for me. I'm very appreciative. I think that the great union that I have with my wife, Jackie, has enabled me to look for things to do to help to contribute to the Jewish community.
I went to Durfee Central High and then to Wayne State. And I'm a native Detroiter, born here. I graduated from Wayne in 1943 with a bachelor's degree in arts and business. My favorite charity in the city is Friendship Circle. We were founding members of that organization and believe wholeheartedly and enjoy visiting them and spending the better part of our charities in that organization. Many people know my age. I'm 92, going on 93 this year, and many people attribute that to my genes. My parents came from Russia in the late 1890s, and unfortunately, my father died at 59 and my mother at 70. So I hardly think my genes are attributed to them. However, I'm grateful for them and the upbringing I've had. Now, that that's said out of the way, you might want to know what brings me to the table in the first place. And to that, one of the best things that have happened to me in my life is my wife, Muriel, who is here, of course. Early on, maybe some 40 years ago, we were walking down the street in Charlevoix, Michigan, where we like to visit every summer. And if many of you know that area, we were crossing the bridge on Main Street. And she said to me, I just read an article that I think applies to you. And I said, what does it say? She said, why don't you read it? I said, no, tell me about it. I'd like to know what it said. She said, according to this article, age is just a number. And the way you handle that is you pick an age early in your life, and that's your age for the rest of your life. She says, remember, your mother always used to say, act your age, be your age, what is your age? So as we were walking, I said, I think that's a great idea, and I'm going to be 48 the rest of my life. That means psychologically, I work with young people all the time. And I never accepted any other date but 48. My birthdays were always celebrated at 48. Muriel used to say, are you going to be 49 this year? And I said, hell no, I'm 48. One day I woke up and I found out I was 90. And it's very interesting because our internist at Ford Hospital invited Muriel and myself to dinner on that night. And we didn't go with them, but I did not know It was a put-up job. It was a surprise party for me for 100 people. And we lived all of a sudden at 90 for that whole weekend. And Monday morning, when I woke up, I called our internist at Ford and said, "Doctor, screw 90. I'm back to 48.
I was born in Brooklyn, and I lived in a brownstone type of house where my father's office was in the same building as the house. And I was an art major in high school and came to the University of Michigan in 1950, and I became pre-med because my father, whom I'll tell you about in a few minutes, expected me to be a doctor. And so I was pre-med for 4 years. Oh, actually, yes, 4 years. And then I had met my husband as a sophomore. His name is Eli, and he is an orthodontist, but he was in undergrad school. We were together. And I realized that given the kind of personality that I have, which I give at least 150 to 200% to everything, I couldn't be the kind of doctor, wife, and mother that I would want to be. So I had to give something up, and I decided to give medicine up. And I was in a rowboat with my father in Massachusetts, trying to analyze what I should do since I had decided not to be a doctor. And he said, "Well, why don't you become a medical illustrator?" And I thought, well, that sounds like an interesting idea because it's a combination of both of my interests. I think my inspiration has come from two sources. One is subliminal messages that I have gotten from the incredible family that I was fortunate to be born into. My maternal grandparents came from Russia in the late 1800s. They were Orthodox Jews. And my grandfather had a most unusual philosophy, and that is that the world is my country and doing good is my religion. What a powerful message that was. I don't think it hit me as much when I was younger. And my mother's name was Clara Collins, and believe it or not, she was one of the honorees in the very first 8/80 program that they had in metropolitan Detroit. The second source has come from my own personal perspective on life and my experiences. In 1973, I had the opportunity to attend book fair at the JCC at Curtis and Myers, where Irwin Shaw and Melba Weiner introduced a new program that they were setting up at the center, an English language program for the large number of Jews from the former Soviet Union that they were expecting in Detroit. And so we started a program and we started teaching, and one of the things that I found most moving was when we would sit in class and we would introduce each other as we got new students, and many of the immigrants would say, well, in Russia I was a doctor, or in Russia I was a lawyer, or in Russia I was dean of Moscow University's economics school of economics. And here I'm a nobody. And that statement tugged at my heartstrings unbelievably, because I felt I couldn't let them have such a terrible self-image of themselves, and I had to do what I could to change that. I just have to mention that I'm always asked, how do you teach English to people who don't speak the languages, and how do you communicate? And my answer has always been, I teach with a lot of love, because love and caring have a universal message, and they break down all language barriers. When I got the call that I had been chosen as one of the 8/80 honorees for 2014, I couldn't believe it. I was totally overwhelmed, because I have never in my life done anything to expect accolades or any honors for doing something that comes instinctively. I mean, I just do things naturally to help people.